Hello everyone. My book presentation is on this book called The Sixth Extinction: An Unnatural History, which is by Elizabeth Kolbert. And just like a little overview, this book is basically arguing that we as a society and as a planet as a whole are going through what she calls the sixth mass extinction in the history of the planet. So the one before us is the it was the end of the Cretaceous period when the dinosaurs all died out, along with several other species, which was around 66 million years ago. So she's arguing that this extinction that we're in is not only caused solely by humans, which is the first time that this has ever happened in the history of the planet, because humans have only been around for 200,000 years or so. Um, but yeah, that we're the cause of it, and also that we are in the midst of it. So yeah, just some background about the author, Elizabeth Kolbert. She is currently a staff writer at The New Yorker. She's been there since 1999, so around 25 years. And before that, she worked at The New York Times. She won for general nonfiction a Pulitzer Prize for this book. She specializes in environmental and climate-related journalism. That's most of the work that she does relates to that. She's very, very experienced, very well-rounded in that aspect. She's written four other nonfiction books, three of which, the first three that I listed, are also on climate and the environment. Um, and to dive deep a little bit more into just like get the overview of her book, um, it's focused, she structures it. There's 13 chapters, and each chapter is devoted to a certain species. So the first half-ish, the species that she's writing about are very ancient species that died out at some point um, in the planet's history, along with the dinosaurs. So that's where she spends a lot of the time at the beginning. And during those few chapters, she's explaining also like the historical background of the time and like for example, she talks about in the first chapter, she mentions that the concept of mass extinction was not really accepted by society and science, society as a whole, but also science, until like 1980, because that was when the theory of the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs came about. And it wasn't really until that point that people really believed that mass extinction was a real thing. So basically, yeah, there's 13 chapters. Each one just focuses on one specific species. She um, does a lot of research. She provides a lot of background information, but a lot of the information from the book comes from her field work. She not only interviews researchers and scientists, but she also goes out into the field with them, camps with them, hikes with them, talks with them, obviously, but like she's very, very like into what she's doing, which you can tell when you read it and in the examples of the fieldwork that I'm going to share eventually. But yeah, basically, just to say it again, what makes this book important and what her essential claim is, this is a very, very intriguing point in time that we're living in, because this is the first mass extinction that we've seen um, since, the end of the dinosaurs. It's the first one caused by humans, the first one that humans are around for. And so while she acknowledges that it's a very scary and, it's a problem because, I mean, animals are dying everywhere. She also says that it's a very extraordinary, truly extraordinary moment in which we live, and she hopes that the readers are able to get a little bit of relief in knowing that, all is a cycle of life. Species come, species go, and that's just the way it is. But yeah. So diving into the lowercase a aboutness and the capital A aboutness, I feel like she kind of states exactly those in this one quote at the end of the book. What I've been trying to do is trace an extinction event called the Holocene extinction or the Anthropocene extinction. I'm probably not pronouncing those right, or if you prefer the sound of it, the sixth extinction. Basically, those are all like the first two are the scientific names that researchers and scientists have been calling this sixth extinction. Um, and then to continue the quote, and to place this event in the broader context of life's history. So she's trying to reveal basically that what's going on right now is not, it's unique in the sense that it's only caused by humans, but the whole concept of like species living and dying and, you know, things change, things like are constantly changing. She's trying to show that that is just kind of the way that things are and have always been. Um, but she's trying to show that through these deep investigations into the species of the past and the species of the present, how they're different, how they're similar, how these species originated, why it is that they're dying out, why is it important that they're dying out, what impacts is that going to have on other species, what impacts is that going to have on us as humans, what impacts are they going to have on the climate, and all sorts of things like that. So those little details about these species, I would say, are the lowercase aboutness. It's like how what's basically going on a surface level. And then she kind of zooms out, takes a different perspective from farther back, just to reinforce the fact that what's happening, is a problem. That's one thing that she wants to state. It is a problem, and that humans are destructive more than any other species on Earth. But she also really wants to convey to the readers that while we do have the capacity to do a lot of damage and a lot of harm, we also have the capacity to reverse that, to make those changes. And we've already done a lot of that. And we see that with these researchers who are, making all of these grave attempts to save these species, doing research, doing all sorts of things. We're a very smart, innovative species. And if we have the power to destroy, we also have the power to heal. And she really just wants to drive that in to the readers to know that, where while this is a problem, there's still hope and there's still light at the end of the tunnel. She says, I'm gonna hide the camera. Okay, I can't hide the camera. Basically, she says it doesn't matter whether people care or don't care. What matters is that people change the world. Basically, yeah. All right, so I turned the camera off just so that you could see the whole slide. But now we're going to be talking about the structure. So from the very beginning, I noticed there's she's doing something interesting from the very beginning because this is a very scientific book, so she doesn't have to add these like literary devices in there, because like the whole point of this is to, I mean, it's about science, right? But she makes it interesting by putting little twists and little techniques in there. And the first one that I noticed was the delayed identification. So in the prologue, she is describing this new species with quotes around it, which is actually referring to humans, but she doesn't mention that at the beginning. So these are some examples of how the prologue kind of goes. It says beginnings, etc., have to be shadowy. So it is with this story, which starts with the emergence of a new species maybe 200 years ago. And then I put in bold, the species does not yet have a name. Nothing does, but it has the capacity to name things. So when she says like decides to say these species, she's basically that, along with the fact that she's not identifying it. She's like making the reader distance themselves because like as humans we are kind of selfish and self-righteous and we don't necessarily always like to admit when we're wrong. And so if from the get-go she's like humans are destructive and we are ruining everything, it's like do you want to keep reading that? Possibly, but maybe you don't. Maybe you don't want to acknowledge the fact that you're part of the problem, and then later on, she continues to slowly, like, open the curtain. She says, although a land animal, our species, pay attention to the our, which is different from the. She says, our species, ever inventive, crosses the sea. Several things happen more or less at once that allow Homo sapiens, there she goes, giving the scientific name, as has come to call itself, to reproduce in an unprecedented rate. And then finally says humans on page 2. So it's about 2 pages before she really finally says, these humans, okay, this is who we're talking about. And so I think this is a really smart technique, like using the delayed identification, because it hooks the reader. Not only does it distance them, but it hooks them because they don't know what species she's talking about. There's an element of mystery, and it urges them to continue reading to find out. And I think that's a really important thing that she decided to do because, like I said earlier, humans tend to not like to fess up to their wrongdoings, and so by doing this, she's preventing that like rejection that may have come if she didn't decide to do that. And then the next section on structure, So basically, I'm just going to be talking about the way that she formats her chapters. So she begins, there's 13 chapters, but she begins each one by just like stating scientific background information on the species she's about to investigate. So like its history, its environment, relation to other species, and whatever. And then she also adds additional context, basically like society's general understanding at the time, as well as like what level we were at scientifically, and how we conceived these extinctions, the ones in the past. And after giving this context, she really dives deep into her fieldwork and her scenes. She establishes a narrative between herself, the researchers she's working with, and the environment. Um, and this gives us like for me as a reader, the context, going back to the context, I think the context that she added helped me to become interested in the story, because a big thing that we've touched on in this class is making sure that our stories are intriguing to all kinds of people, not just people we know or care about, who care about the specific topic that we're writing about. And I am not a scientific person by any means. I care about the climate and everything, but I don't really know much about um, the environment, like the history. I mean, the history of animal species and whatnot. And I think that if Colbert avoided talking about the history of these extinctions, the so what question wouldn't really be answered. I think we need that context also to better understand the significance of her argument that we are in the midst of a sixth extinction. So I think deciding to structure her story that way was really effective, coming from somebody who isn't in the science world, really. Um, and just adding on to that, not just my own perspective, but I think this tactic is also smart because it broadens her audience and also helps spread awareness more quickly and effectively, because you really don't have to be an expert on climate change or animal biology to understand what this book is doing or what this book is talking about. And yeah. So like I said before, her fieldwork in this piece is excellent, doing exactly what we should all aim to be doing, in our own, journalistic careers and whatnot. But yeah, her fieldwork's actually physically in the field. She's not just conducting interviews with these people. She's physically traveling to these places, observing, conducting her own research, and talking with these researchers and scientists. And just some of the places she goes to are the Great Barrier Reef, South American tropical rainforest, the El Valle Forest in Panama, the Icelandic Museum of Natural History. But yeah, she goes all over the globe for this. And these excursions, she stated, she was either invited to them or she sought them out on her own. And in chapter 7, which is one of my favorite chapters just because of the amount of detail that she really I just really like her descriptions of everything pretty much in this chapter. But she travels to an island in the Great Barrier Reef, of Australia, meets with this researcher named Ken Caldera, who also takes her diving to observe how much the corals have changed over the years. And she introduces this concept of mass spawning in reefs, where corals basically reproduce asexually. And she focuses on one common coral in particular called the Acropora millipora. And she describes this taking place, and I included the quote right here. She says, "I was in the first shift, initially was disappointed because nothing seemed to be happening. Then after a while, I noticed a few corals releasing their bundles. The scene resembled a blizzard in the Alps, only in reverse. The water filled with streams of pink beads floating toward the surface, like snow falling upward. Iridescent worms appeared to eat the bundles, producing an eerie glow, and a slick mob began to form on the surface." So not only is this quote just beautiful. She doesn't. I really paid attention that she didn't exclude her opinion here, stating that she was disappointed at first, and I think that really adds to her voice. Also, she's highly observational, as a journalist needs to be, but she doesn't let that. She doesn't take herself out of it. She's a fly on the wall, but she also likes to speak her mind at times. Um, and yeah, she doesn't exclude creativity at all. She has some great sensory descriptions here. I really liked the vision of the blizzard in reverse. That was super unique. Um, yeah, I found it really beautiful. I thought it was really well done. And then not only does one really interesting thing about her field work is not only does she pay really close attention on these species, but also on the researchers that she's encountering. And another example here would be her description of the researcher Ken Caldera. She says he's in his mid-50s, has curly brown hair, boyish smile. And this is the most interesting description, a voice that tends to rise toward the end of his sentences so that it often seems he is posing a question even when he's not. Um, and I think this description is just so specific and it brings him to life so much more. I feel like if she left these descriptions out, all these researchers would blend together since they're all essentially doing the same thing, just like showing her around, and talking to her about species, and like doing this, it really makes each chapter stand out. And it just makes the book overall more interesting because if you don't have characters in a book, why would you care? And I think that's what makes this decision, I think, really effective here. And like another thing, in a scientific book, you wouldn't necessarily expect her to describe these researchers in as close detail as she does the species, but it humanizes them, makes the story less just like hard facts and adds more life into it. Another chapter I really liked was chapter 8 called The Forest and the Trees. And in this chapter, there's more great characterization of not only the environment that she's in, but also of the researcher that she's with. So in this chapter, she travels to Peru and is with this forest ecologist named Miles Silman, who specializes in tropical ecosystems. And in this chapter, she's basically highlighting the misconception that climate change will only negatively impact species in cold climates, polar bears, for example, but that tropical climates will face just as much difficulty because there's so much more species that live there, and they depend on the heat to thrive. And even like a few degrees of an increased temperature can just wipe out an entire species. And another thing that she notes is that because they're so dependent upon each other, when one goes down, they all go down type of thing. Um, but yeah, basically in this chapter, the ecologist research reveals that trees in the tropical forest have grown significantly taller as temperatures have increased. And she describes the different plots of trees throughout the forest in this quote here. She says, back on the trail, someone hacked away with his machete, pausing every now and then to point out a new botanical oddity, like a shrub that steals water from its neighbors by sticking out needle-like roots. Silman talks about plants the way other people talk about movie stars. One tree he described to me as charismatic, others were hilarious, crazy, neat, clever, and amazing. So here she's talking about how unique and different these trees are from another, but at the same time, the way that she does this, the way that she structures this description by talking about like including how Silman describes it, she's also characterizing him at the same time as a very eccentric, funny, amusing kind of person. I think that was really interesting. And then another really beautiful description of the environment. The farther we descended, the denser the forest became. The trees were not just trees, they were more like botanical gardens covered with ferns and orchids and bromeliads, strung with lianas. In some spots, the vegetation was so thick that soil mats had formed above the ground, and these had sprouted a plant of their own, forests in the air. Um, and I what I like about Colbert's style here is she's explaining her surroundings in a way that the average human person can understand them. Obviously, she's giving us a lot of scientific information here at the beginning, which comes out in the interviews with the researchers, not only in this chapter, but all of them. But it's in paragraphs like these where she's telling us what it is that she's seeing from her perspective alone that makes me feel like I'm there. And I especially love that forest in the airline, because like you can talk about scientifically, oh, this is what's happening, this is what it's doing, but it's hard to like put an image in the head of someone who's not there, who doesn't really understand environment or climate or the way that things work. But the forest and the air, I mean, that was what sold it for me. I was like, oh, okay, I see what you're saying. And yeah, I just loved it. And her voice is just like, it's very much a fly on the wall, but it works great. And yeah, I like that the fact that she inserts her opinion at times. It makes the story feel more real. Um, yeah. So basically, to sum up, like what can we steal from Colbert? As I was saying, I love the fact that she's so genuine with her voice. She doesn't shy away from, speaking her mind at times, from voicing, she's really vulnerable with us, like saying like, oh, I was disappointed here, like, oh, I didn't like this, I didn't like that. Um, and it just makes the story feel more real and more human. I honestly wouldn't want to read a scientific novel about climate change without any elements of humanity, and I think she was able to incorporate both very seamlessly, very smoothly in a way that I mean, anyone would honestly, I think I would recommend this book to anyone because you don't have to have really extensive knowledge on climate or science really at all because she just kind of lays it out for you. But yeah, again, like I really liked her use of delayed identification for dramatic stylistic effect as well as hooking the reader. We can also take from her just like going the extra mile to describe the supposedly unimportant details such as these characters, the researchers in her book, and also just like her field work is really impressive. I think you need to have really thorough field work when you're writing about climate. I mean, it wouldn't really make sense if you're writing about the field when you're not physically there. But I know a lot of us have been focusing on, doing like research on our computers, as field work. But I think it would be really great. I mean, maybe not in this project, but in future projects for me personally, to really just go a little bit deeper, because I think it's really effective. Yeah. And this is just the last quote that I think really encapsulates the whole purpose of this book. She says, "My hope is that the readers of this book will come away with an appreciation of the truly extraordinary moment in which we live." And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening. Bye.